Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is Tuesday or Monday afternoon, depending on when you get this. Um, and we're starting with our second and final part, talking about the Enlightenment era, which is going to deal with some of the philosophies and new ideas that come about during this time. So, hope everybody's doing well. I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody tomorrow, going over what we've been up to and all that good stuff. And hopefully you'll have a chance to look over these notes here pretty soon, so we can kind of discuss maybe a little bit in class tomorrow. But we'll see how that goes. So last time in the Enlightenment, we talked about many of the scientific advances that took place during this time, particularly talking about Newton, um, Galileo, and Copernicus, and the medical advances through people like William Harvey and Vesalius, understanding human anatomy better and blood circulation through the body and all those important factors that are going to move society forward. Okay, so what's going to do it even more so is philosophy. Now, I've told you many times I'm not a big philosophy guy. I think in basis, philosophers spend time discussing and thinking about things that really don't matter, right? Talking about things like what is the essence of a particular object? Why is a ball, right? What makes it what it is? Well, you know, it's that because the person that made the first one called it a ball. So therefore, that's why it is what it is, right? So philosophy a lot of times spends time just talking about these points and not really worrying as much about things that can actually affect life and change things in a significant way. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit today about some new philosophies and new aspects on life that occurred during the Enlightenment that really have a major impact on the future of society. So now, um, the philosophy of this era is different in the sense that it's largely based on using the concept of reason. Now, who is that guy that is kind of the father of the age of reason? We mentioned him yesterday. Who is he again? What was his name? Somebody. Hmm. All right. Well, thanks anyway. Uh, Sir Francis Bacon, right? Sir Francis Bacon is the person responsible for the age of reason. He also is considered the father of the scientific method, using science to kind of explain different aspects of life. Okay. This reaches its peak probably during the 18th century, during the 1700s, is when a lot of these prominent philosophical figures, particularly what we call philosophes, it's a French term, and we'll talk about them in a minute, really make most of their significant claims. And they do stuff, talking about rights, talking about politics, society, education, economics, everything you could think of, these people were involved with. Okay, so let's talk about them a little bit. Before we go any further into talking about the different philosophes, okay, um, you got to understand that uh, even though none of the folks that we're going to talk about actually came from there, the ones that we're talking about, they're all the beginnings of the Enlightenment movement, and this philosophical movement is rooted in Italy. And what's the irony in it all being rooted in Italy? Ethan? No, it doesn't have anything to do with tennis. Sorry. Um, what it has to do with, folks, is the fact that society as we understood it kind of ended. With the fall of the Roman Empire, which of course was in Italy as well, and now society is resuming or coming back also out of Italy. So that's kind of an interesting comparison there. So understand, right? The philosophes, the goal of the philosophes was really to change the world, not just discuss it. Now, I told you before, I'm not a big guy on philosophy in terms of these philosophers having this belief or that belief and how it's relevant to or it's irrelevant to things that are worthy of understanding or not. Um, these are folks that are looking at problems or issues in society and actually want to do something to improve upon the position of the people that they're trying to impact. And more importantly, when we say trying to impact people, we're not simply talking about we're not talking about the wealthy, the nobles, and the people that usually have advantages. We're talking about ways to benefit lives for everybody. Okay, and this is one way that these folks stand out. All right, so let's talk about some. First of all, we have Thomas Hobbes. He comes in a little bit before the others. He lives from about 1588 to 1679. Now, Hobbes is basically has this book that he writes called Leviathan, and you should be able to. I think I read about it in the chapter. I'll do my best to spell it out here. Leviathan. Leviathan. Wow, that was terrible. Leviathan. Anyway, so Leviathan basically is this book that talks about life and political ideologies. And its general premise, the general idea, and make sure you write this down and understand this as well, is that basically absolute power is an important thing. He argues for the importance of absolute power. Why? Because it's a good thing because it ensures people's drive for self-preservation. Hobbes argues that the number one thing, in Leviathan, Hobbes argues that the number one thing people seek in life is self-preservation. In other words, trying to ensure their longevity in their existence as long as possible. This is what drives them. Therefore, seeking more power, seeking absolute power, puts us in a better position to increase our longevity. Does that make sense? Hopefully. If not, we can discuss tomorrow or Thursday, right? So Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes, absolute power is a good thing. We're driven by self-preservation. Next person to talk about, John Locke. Now he's really important actually for us in America. I am horrible with this thing, by the way. Anyway, whatevs. So Locke was a big driving force, actually, even though he had passed away as an Englishman. Was a driving force that really inspired the people, the founding fathers that wrote the Declaration of Independence and ultimately the Constitution. Two big things about John Locke. Okay, number one is what he is another political ideology that he calls the social contract theory. Social contract theory, right? You got that? Social contract theory, contract, social. And what the social contract theory is essentially that people will give up certain freedoms in order to ensure their protection. This is a political argument. People will give up certain freedoms in order to ensure their protection. In other words, having a government, and the government has a military, I can accept certain limitations that I might not otherwise have because I know I'll be protected by the government. Okay, what would be an example of this? Okay, we pay taxes in the United States so that money can go to fund things to help benefit the country. Okay, we could all not have taxes, but then there would be nothing out there to benefit us, and the government would have no power. Right? We see that kind of playing out today with this whole coronavirus thing. Right? We're willing to stay at our homes for the public good because we want to see people get healthy again from this virus. So we're willing to sacrifice some of those freedoms because it provides us protection, and we know that the governments will do what they can. We hope that the government will do what it can to provide testing and all the stuff we need to limit the spread of the virus, right? So it's basically what we're seeing now is the social contract theory at work. Another one by John Locke, and this one's from the reading too. This is called a couple things. Some people call it the tabula rasa. Some people call it the blank slate theory. Okay, this is an idea that we're not born predestined to certain things, that God hasn't already simply decided whether we're going to be a good person or a bad person. The blank slate theory simply states that our environment is what determines the type of person we're going to be. If you grow up in a rough environment, you're more likely to commit crimes, maybe. If you grow up in a nurturing environment, you're more likely to be stable and successful. Okay, this is called the tabula rasa or blank slate theory. Okay, that people are born, um, with a blank slate, clear of everything, and it's their experiences, it's their environment that molds them. Okay, their environment that molds them. Again, if we have questions about this, we can ask when we have Zoom tomorrow. Third person, this is a Frenchman by the name of Voltaire. He's also in the reading assignment. Voltaire was a really important person building up to the French Revolution. Okay, his writings, even though he died about a decade before the French Revolution happened, really inspired people in France. Okay, Voltaire was what we call a satirist. Okay, he wrote a lot of satire. Satire is basically, and I want you to write this down so you know, Satire. Oh my gosh. Like I am a terrible handwriting normally, but this is like even worse. Might as well put these on the slide. Sorry about that, folks. Satire is basically using humor as a means to get a point across. Using humor as a way to get a particular point across to people. Okay, that's what satire is. Yeah. Anyway, so satire is again this way that you use humor to get a point across. Humor is easily understood by most people. That way, getting these ideas out to the general masses during the French Revolution is really successful because it's a simple way to show people that you're unhappy with the direction of the government. Voltaire was also he was a wealthy guy, so he had some influence. He was generally disliked by the French government because he was so critical of them. So he openly criticized the French government, which is something you would never do back then. So he really took a big chance and went outside a comfort zone to pursue ideas that were very controversial at the time. So that makes him stand. Voltaire was also a big advocate for civil rights or equal rights for people early. I'm not talking about civil rights in terms of race, but more from an economic perspective. Speaking of we'll talk about Diderot first. Denis Diderot, really quick here. He's a really big figure, and he's also in the reading again. Um, he's largely responsible for the creation of the first ever encyclopedia. Okay, why is this a big deal? What does an encyclopedia do? It provides us with information. Okay, his collection was the first one was a 35 volume set of books that had all kinds of information in it. This information could be accessed by average everyday people, making knowledge and information much more easily attained for folks. So this is a big step forward. Again, education we're talking about, making knowledge more accessible for average people. Diderot writing the first encyclopedia is a big step in that direction. Another big person in the field of economics was a guy named Adam Smith. Now, he wrote a book published in 1776, the same year as the American Revolution, called Wealth of Nations. Wealth of Nations. I'm not even going to try to spell it on there, right? But it's in the reading from the homework that's due on Tuesday. So Wealth of Nations. In this, Smith outlines the concept of laissez-faire economics, okay, meaning free enterprise or free market economics, meaning people can succeed or fail without any limitations from the government. If I want to start a business, I can go start a business. If I succeed, great. If I fail, that's too bad. The government's saying Smith is saying the government should not interfere with people trying to benefit their financial position. You take risks, right? You be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, by definition, is a risk taker. Okay, there should be no governmental limits on the amount of money people can make. That is the future of economics. This is why Adam Smith is called the father of modern economics, right? Because in the United States, we have what's called a free market economy. In other words, There's no government limitation saying I can't start a business if I want to. That business could fail, but there's nothing saying I can't start that. How is that different than other countries? Because in communist countries or countries that are authoritarian and lack rights for people, such as Nazi Germany or some other places around the world presently, you can't just do that. You need to get approval. The government needs to say you're a chosen person that can do something like that. Smith's idea in Wealth of Nations basically outlines modern economic concepts for people that are still kind of followed today. And finally, Mary Wollstonecraft. Mary Wollstonecraft was an important philosophic leader. She becomes kind of the founder of the women's movement in Europe, or the feminist movement in Europe. She is generally regarded as Europe, or really in some ways the world's first real feminist. Okay, seeking for equal rights and opportunities for women, particularly in education. This was a big, big risk, uh, during the 1700s. And a lot of people didn't react too kindly to the concept of women seeking fair and equal education opportunities, right? But this kind of kicks off the women's movement in Europe. And then, of course, later on, we get the women's movement in the United States. One thing to note in terms of civil and social rights movements, the United States is always a little bit behind Europe. Okay, women get the vote and certain rights in Europe before it happens in the United States, largely due to people like Mary Wollstonecraft. Her daughter, Mary, she also had a daughter named Mary, is actually the woman who wrote Frankenstein. Okay, but it wasn't her. A lot of people think she did. Her daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, wrote Frankenstein, but don't worry about that. That will be on a test or quiz. So hopefully that makes sense. Play it back if you don't understand some of it, and we can also review tomorrow. All right, so not a title for this one. That's why I put not a title there. All right. So during the Enlightenment, we also see the emergence of popular music, uh, classical music with big concerts and people like Beethoven and Bach and Mozart becomes popular during this time. Okay, where music for the masses can first be enjoyed. So that's a big step in a new direction for people to have kind of like a popular form of music that can be enjoyed and used, not just to be used and sung in church, not just to be used for uh, special events for wealthy people, but forms of music to be enjoyed by the masses. This is a big step, right? It's classical music as a form of music that lead us in the long run to getting other forms of music that we have later on, ultimately to like jazz music and to ragtime and to country music and to rock and roll, disco, hip hop, all that stuff. It all goes back to classical music in some respect. All right, so by the end of the Enlightenment, the average person was more educated than we'd ever seen before in history. So say by about the year 1800, should I even try it again? 1800. People are more educated now than they'd ever been before. Okay, uh, more people going to college, or more colleges opening up. Still not a lot relative to today. We still don't have a ton of people going to college, but there's more than ever before. So this is a big step forward for society, and it shows us just kind of the direction that the world is really kind of moving in. Okay, so again, all this education, all this learning, all these ways for regular everyday people to start looking at the world in a different way leads to very, very significant changes that we still see as very, very present in society today. All right, so hopefully all that makes sense. We're going to be done for today. Tomorrow we're going to start talking about the French Revolution for the next couple of days, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow when we have our Zoom conference. Hope everybody's well. See you.